Refining our gear setup as fishermen is one of the best things that we can do. And in today's video, I'm going to show you the changes that I made last year that helped me on the water. As fishermen, we spend a lot of time looking at new gear, whether evaluating if a new rod will make us cast farther, if a new fly line will actually let us catch more fish, or if there is such a thing as a perfect fly. Spoiler alert, there isn't. All this time that we spend looking at adding gear would in fact, I think, be better used if we evaluated and refined the gear that we had. And in this video, I'm going to cover 4 changes that I made around my gear setup and configuration that helped me this past season. So let me start with a couple of key principles. And the first is that evaluating and refining your gear should be a regular practice. Whether it's coming off a long stretch from not fishing or taking a few minutes when you get home after most of your trips. By regularly evaluating what works and what doesn't work when you're fishing will allow you to make that fishing experience a little bit better next time. The second principle I'd love for you to think about is that as you identify changes or as you think about things that you want to make different, don't feel like you have to make all those changes at once. Rather, think about gear setup and refinement sort of like a dial, right? You are just slightly adjusting that dial each time you go fishing to really optimize what your setup is. And I think for me, this second principle is really important because frequently it feels like, gosh, there's a lot of things that I need to change about my gear setup or the way different things are on my bag. And instead, when we take it more of a slow but steady approach, that helps us to feel less overwhelmed while ultimately being able to test out things in a very effective way. And the third and final principle for you is to be willing to customize your gear setup, your bag setup, your rod setup to what you need, right? I think oftentimes there is pressure to look like everybody else on the water or to look a certain way with our gear. But in fact, one of the best ways to make fishing easier is to set up your gear and your equipment in a way that works best for you. So now that I've covered the principles around gear setup and changes, let me just go ahead and cover 4 changes that I made last season that helped me be a better fisherman. You know, Tippet spools are a little bit like moving into a bigger house, right? The more room you have, you feel like you need to fill it up. And for me, the first change that I made this past year was to actually reduce the number of Tippet spools that I have down to 2. So I've got 5X right here. And then over here, I've got just some basic monofilament that I've had for years and I'm trying to use up. And the nice benefit, if you will, to changing out the Tippet spools and reducing the amount that I had was that I found it a lot easier to access the ones that I needed. So there was less time wasted on the water getting to the right Tippet spool. And then the second benefit is that it made me really think about what size tippet do I need for the fishing that I'm doing, right? So having all of these different types of tippet, while it might feel like you're covering yourself in all kinds of situations, I'd be willing to bet that for the most part, depending on where you're fishing, 1 or 2 tippet spools will be all that you need. So the next major change that I made was around fly bends. Now, I don't know about you, but I have gone through a merry-go-round of different types and choices and sizes and patterns when it comes to the flies that I carry on the water. When I first started out fly fishing, I carried literally every pattern I had, right? I had all kinds of fly bends with me. And then I decided that, well, that's too disorganized. I really need to organize them by type. So I had giant bins of nymphs and dries and streamers and terrestrials. And then I got to a point where I would find the right box after some digging through my fly pack or my sling pack. And I would be paralyzed because I had all these different fly choices ahead in front of me. And from those struggles, what I ultimately decided to do this past year was switch to a working fly bin. So as you can see, right, this bin itself is pretty small, right? It would easily fit in a pocket. And on one side, I've got some nymphs. And then on the other side, I've got some dry fly patterns and some eggs. And You know, these flies in here probably cover me 90% of the time that I'm on the water. And what having a working fly bin has done has given me some more confidence about what flies to fish, but then it's also allowed me to waste less time changing out flies, right? So I know that I've got 2 or 3 types of dry flies. Well, that makes that decision a lot easier. So in addition to having a working fly bin, I also have a backup fly bin. So on one side, we've got dry flies as well as some terrestrials and worms. And then on the other side, we've just got a bunch of different nymphs in different sizes and different colors. And, you know, I don't go into this bin very often. I was actually looking at this bin this past winter, and I didn't have to really refill much of it because I've used this working bin so much. So I would encourage you to think about the flies that you use. Also really think about the flies that you don't use, and consider switching to maybe one main bin while you're on the water. So in addition to making changes around tippet and fly bins, the other major change that I've made is I've started to use a net. Now, I've been fishing for a very long time and I've never carried a net with me. The first reason was that I didn't really own a really good one, right? And the second reason is that I never really saw the benefit of it. But as I did some research around catch and release fishing and the way that nets help with the handling and safe return of fish to the water, I really became convinced that I needed to use a net. So I went ahead and got one. And I've used this one quite a few times this season. And, you know, I feel like the biggest challenge with the net is not in how to use it, but in where to put it on my pack. So I typically carry a very small sling pack with me, and I have not found a good place as sort of like where to put it, right? Like kind of what side. And so I ultimately will get a smaller net that I'll demo for you guys in the future. But since using a net, I found that getting the fish are a little bit easier, and then you can release them a little bit easier. And I think that there's less stress and hopefully less damage to the fish. So the final change that I made was around indicators. Now, I know indicators in fly fishing are a little bit like using gutters in bowling. Some people need them. Everybody makes fun of them when you use them. But for me, I have used all different types of indicators over the years. So everything from cork, old school cork, to New Zealand style, to, you know, kind of bobber style, to stickies. And what I ultimately found though this past season was made the decision to just use something like this, which is a Dorsey indicator, right? And I find that this type of indicator is light enough that it doesn't mess up the presentation on the water, but it is also buoyant enough that it can basically be used all day. And all you've got to do is just add some, you know, some dry fly floating to it. And for me, simplifying down to just using one indicator has had several benefits. The first was that it allowed me to really learn how to use this indicator, right? What situations to use it, how to adjust it, how to put it on, how to take it off. In addition to that, it helped me to have a little more confidence while using this indicator, because I knew that, hey, this is the primary one I'm gonna use, and so I need to become really, really good with it now. And for me, after I made up a handful of them and I've been using them this year, I feel like they've really helped me fish better, right, and catch more fish. I cannot take credit for the Dorsey indicator. There's another channel called Trout Bitten that has an excellent video on how to make these. They're pretty simple. They're just some, you know, some yarn or some other floating material along with just a small rubber band in the center, and they go on and they come off very easily from your fly line. So I will go ahead and link to that Trout Bitten article as well as their YouTube video, and I would encourage you to check them out. Fantastic resource on fly fishing, and particularly around the Dorsey indicator. They've got a lot of really good information on how to make it and how to use it. And once you've checked all that out, I would encourage you to consider using the Dorsey indicator for yourself, because I think you'll find that it is far superior to almost every other indicator out there. By thinking about the gear we carry and how it's configured, we will ultimately make the fishing experience a little bit easier and hopefully catch some more fish in the process. So I'd encourage you to spend some time evaluating and changing your gear setup. And I think that when you do, you'll find that it is time well spent. Ultimately, by refining and changing the way that our gear fits and is on. So with those principles stated, let's go ahead and talk about the 4th changes that I made this past season to my own gear setup.